The night I realized I was no longer a mother. The rain didn't start as a storm. It never does. It began softly, tapping against the windows like hesitant fingers, the kind of rain that feels almost polite. I noticed it while folding laundry in the spare bedroom, the one that used to be my son's before he got married and moved out. I still kept it neat, still washed the sheets every month, as if he might come home one day and need the bed. I was 65 years old that night. I remember thinking that number sounded older than I felt. My hands shook a little, yes. My knees complained when I climbed stairs. But inside, I was still the woman who had raised a child alone after my husband died. The woman who worked double shifts, skipped meals, and taught herself to be strong because no one else would do it for her. I never imagined that strength would be tested by my own family. The phone rang while I was matching socks. "Amy," my son's voice said, sharp and rushed. "You need to come here. Now." There was something in his tone that made my stomach tighten. Not worry. Not fear. Anger. "I can't drive in the rain," I said. "It's getting heavy." "You should have thought of that earlier," he snapped. "Just come." The line went dead. I stood there holding two mismatched socks, staring at the wall, listening as the rain grew louder. I told myself it was nothing. My son had always been short-tempered since his marriage. Stress, responsibilities, life, these things change people, I thought. I folded the socks anyway. By the time I reached their house, the rain had turned cruel. Wind shoved against my old car, and my hands clenched the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, bright and unforgiving. The door opened before I could knock. My daughter-in-law stood there. She was wrapped in a shawl, her face pale, eyes wide. For a moment, I felt a flicker of concern, until I saw the way her lips tightened when she saw me. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was impossible. "What?" I said. "I wasn't even here." My son's eyes were cold. "Stop lying, Amy." I felt something inside me crack, not loudly but deeply, like ice under pressure. "She called you names," my daughter-in-law continued. She grabbed my arm. "Look." She pulled up her sleeve. There were marks. Red. Angry. I stared at them, confused, my mouth dry. "I didn't do this," I whispered. My son took a step toward me. "I saw the cameras." That word hit me harder than any slap. Cameras. "They don't lie," he said. The rain thundered outside as if the sky itself was listening. "I raised you," I said quietly. "I would never." "Enough," he cut me off. "I don't want excuses." He opened the door behind me. "Leave." I didn't move. I couldn't. "Leave," he said again, louder this time. "Before I call the police." The world tilted. The rain rushed in as the door stayed open, cold and relentless. I looked at my daughter-in-law one last time. She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling. I stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind me. And in that moment, standing alone in the storm, soaked and shaking, I understood something that would change everything. I was no longer a mother in that house. I was a problem they had decided to erase. The storm didn't care who was right. The rain swallowed me whole the moment the door shut. Not just rain, wind sharp enough to steal breath, water cold enough to bite through clothes and into bone. I stood there for a second stunned, staring at the closed door as if it might reopen on its own. As if my son might suddenly remember who I was. It didn't. The porch light stayed on, bright and cruel, illuminating me like a criminal who'd just been thrown out. I could hear voices inside, muffled, urgent. Then laughter. Soft. Relieved. My legs felt weak. I walked. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stand there anymore. The streetlights blurred as rain ran into my eyes. Each step felt heavier than the last. My shoes filled with water. My shawl clung to me, useless. The cold crept in slowly at first, then all at once, like it had been waiting its turn. I tried to calm myself. Just walk. Keep moving. That's what I used to tell patients when panic threatened to take over. But I wasn't a nurse anymore. I was a 65-year-old woman alone in a storm, accused of something I hadn't done, abandoned by the child I'd given my life to. A sharp pain shot through my chest. I stopped, bent slightly, pressing a hand over my heart. The rain soaked my hair, plastered it to my face. My breath came in shallow gasps. Not now, I begged my body silently. Please, not now. Cars passed. None slowed. I thought about knocking on a neighbor's door, but shame stopped me. How do you explain something like this? My son threw me out because his wife lied. It sounded unreal even in my own head. I kept walking. The pain in my chest eased, replaced by a numbness that scared me more. My fingers tingled. My left arm felt strange, heavy, uncooperative. I knew these signs. I'd seen them too many times. Stroke, I whispered into the rain. I tried to call for help, but my phone slipped from my shaking hand and fell into a puddle. The screen went dark. I laughed then, soft, broken. So this was how it ended. Not in a hospital bed surrounded by family. Not with dignity. But on a dark road, soaked and forgotten. I don't remember falling. I remember the sound of rain fading, replaced by voices. A man's voice. A woman's. Panic. Hands lifting me. Then darkness. I woke up to beeping. White ceiling. Harsh lights. The smell of antiseptic. A hospital. I turned my head slowly. My body felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. Tubes ran from my arm. My throat was dry, aching. A nurse noticed my movement and rushed over. You're awake, she said gently. Easy. Don't try to sit up. What happened? My voice came out hoarse. You were found unconscious on the roadside, she said. Hypothermia. Mild stroke. You're very lucky. Lucky. The word felt hollow. Do you have family we can call? She asked. I closed my eyes. Yes, I said after a moment. I have a son. She smiled. Good. We'll let him know. I wanted to stop her. I wanted to say don't. But exhaustion wrapped around me, heavy and irresistible. When I woke again, it was daylight. And my son was standing at the foot of my bed. He looked tired. Conflicted. Not worried. Amy, he said. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? I stared at him. You threw me out in a storm, I said quietly. I didn't get the chance. He frowned. That's not fair. You caused a scene. You scared her. I wasn't there, I said. You know that. He hesitated. Just for a second. She showed me the footage, he said. The cameras don't lie. I turned my head away. The nurse returned then, holding a clipboard. Sir, she said to my son, we need to talk about the timing of the incident. What timing? He asked. She collapsed around 9:40 p.m., the nurse continued. Our report shows your home's cameras recorded the alleged incident at 10:15. The room went quiet. My son looked at the nurse. What? The nurse flipped a page. We confirmed it with emergency services. The timestamps don't match. I watched his face change. Confusion. Doubt. A crack. The nurse left. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally he said, that doesn't make sense. I looked at him then, really looked at him. Neither does your wife's story, I said. He swallowed. And for the first time since that night, I saw fear in his eyes, not for me, but for what he was starting to realize. Because lies can survive anger. But they don't survive evidence. The truth has a way of waking up. My son sat down slowly in the chair beside my hospital bed, like his legs no longer trusted him. He rubbed his face with both hands. I noticed then how old he looked. Not just tired, worn. Like someone who had been holding a lie together for too long and was finally feeling the strain. That can't be right, he said again, quieter this time. The cameras, she showed me the clip. What clip? I asked. He hesitated. You, coming into the house. Yelling. Pushing her. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for years. I wasn't there, I said. You know that. You called me while I was at home. I drove straight here. Ask yourself something. If I attacked her, why would I stay? Why would I leave right after and collapse on the road? He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "I'll check the footage again," he muttered. "The full file." Something in my stomach tightened. I knew that tone. It was the sound of denial starting to crack. He stood up abruptly. "I'll be back." When he left the room, the silence pressed in around me. The beeping machines. The distant footsteps. The soft hum of hospital life continuing like nothing world-ending had just happened to me. A doctor came in later. Explained the stroke was mild but real. Stress-induced. Exposure to cold had made it worse. I would recover, but only if I rested, avoided emotional strain, and wasn't exposed to cold or shock again. I almost laughed. Avoid emotional strain, I thought. At my age? That evening, Sophie came. My granddaughter stood in the doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. Her hair was damp, eyes red. She crossed the room in 3 fast steps and took my hand gently, like I might break. "Dottie," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Tears slipped from my eyes before I could stop them. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "But I knew," she said, her voice trembling. "I knew something was off. Mama, she lies. She's done it before. Not like this, but—" "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked softly. She looked down. "Because Baba never listens when it's about her. And because I was scared." I squeezed her hand. "Courage comes when it comes," I said. "Not before." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Baba went home. He's checking the cameras." A pause. "She's panicking." I closed my eyes. Good. 2 hours later, my son came back. This time, he didn't sit. He stood at the foot of my bed, pale, his jaw tight, his phone clenched in his fist like it might explode. "She deleted parts of the footage," he said. I opened my eyes slowly. "There are gaps," he continued. "Small ones. 10 minutes here. 5 minutes there. I didn't notice before because she only showed me clips." He swallowed hard. But the backup cloud didn't update fast enough. The raw files were still there. I said nothing. He turned the phone toward me. On the screen, I saw his living room. Empty. Quiet. Then, his wife walked into frame. Alone. She picked up a glass. Looked around. Then deliberately smashed it against the table. She dragged a chair back hard enough to leave marks on the floor. Then she went to the kitchen. When she came back, she had ice. She pressed it hard against her own arm. Hard enough to bruise. Then, something that made my stomach turn, she slapped herself. Once. Twice. She screamed. Then she adjusted the camera angle. I closed my eyes again. "I didn't want to believe it," my son said hoarsely. "But it's all there." He sat down heavily this time. "She planned it," he whispered. "She waited until I was in the shower. Then she called me into the room and showed me what she wanted me to see." I turned my head toward the window. The sky outside was turning orange, soft and calm, like the world hadn't nearly killed me the night before. "She wanted me gone," I said. "I was in her way." He didn't argue. "She's been talking about selling the house," he admitted. "Moving closer to her parents. She said you were a burden." The word landed exactly where it had the night he threw me out. "I raised you alone," I said quietly. "I never once made you feel like a burden." "I know," he said, tears finally spilling over. "I know." There was a long silence. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "What are you going to do now?" He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "I'm taking her to the police," he said. "False accusation. Evidence tampering. Elder abuse." I nodded slowly. "And after that?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I know one thing." "What?" "I should have believed you." I didn't say yes. I didn't say finally. I said nothing, because some apologies arrived too late to heal what they broke. When the lie finally spoke for itself. I wasn't there when my son confronted her. And maybe that was a mercy. Some battles don't need witnesses, only consequences. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. The doctors insisted. My body was weak, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. Something had shifted inside me during that storm, during those hours when I lay helpless on a dark road thinking my life might end there. Fear had burned away hesitation. What remained was clarity. On the third morning, my son came back. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, eaten, or breathed properly since I last saw him. She denied everything, he said, standing by the window, not looking at me. At first. I waited. She cried, he continued. Screamed. Accused me of choosing you over her. Said you manipulated me. Said you planned this. I almost smiled. Then I showed her the footage, he said quietly. I turned my head toward him. What happened then? I asked. He exhaled slowly. She went silent. He told me later what that silence looked like. How her hands stopped shaking. How her face drained of color. How her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. He said it was like watching someone realize a trap had closed. She tried to bargain, he said. Said we could forget it ever happened. That we could move forward if I deleted the files. And you? I asked. I told her I already made copies. That was when she broke. Not the dramatic kind of breaking, the kind you see in movies with sobbing and apologies. No. This was uglier. Colder. She said she had to do it, he said. That you were in the way. That I was weak around you. That as long as you were around, she'd never really have control of our life. Control. Such an honest word, when spoken without shame. She said you were old, he continued, his voice shaking now. That people like you are supposed to fade quietly. That no one would question it if you did. I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything I had already felt. She said the storm was convenient, he whispered. The room went very quiet. I called the police, he said finally. They're investigating. They took the footage. The hospital report. Statements from neighbors. I nodded. And her? I asked. She packed a bag, he said. She went to her parents. She keeps calling. Leaving messages. Threatening me. Begging. Switching every hour. I felt nothing. No anger. No triumph. Just a strange, deep calm. That afternoon, Sophie came again. She brought me soup and sat beside my bed, her shoulder pressed gently against mine like she used to when she was little. She's telling everyone you planned this, Sophie said softly. Posting things online. Saying you wanted to ruin their marriage. I chuckled weakly. Of course she is. But people aren't believing her, Sophie said. The neighbors remember the night. Someone saw you walking in the rain. Another heard shouting before you even arrived. Truth doesn't rush. But when it arrives, it brings company. When I was discharged, I didn't go to my son's house. I went home. My house. The one I had lived in for 40 years. The one I had paid for. The one I had left standing that night, unsure if I would ever see again. Walking through the front door felt different this time. I noticed things I had ignored before. Cracks that needed fixing. Photos I had stopped really seeing. My husband's chair by the window, worn exactly to his shape. I sat down slowly, carefully. I was alive. That evening, my son came by alone. He stood awkwardly in the doorway like a teenager again. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve that yet. I nodded. That's true. He flinched, but didn't argue. I don't expect you to live with us again, he said. I don't expect anything. I studied his face. The familiar eyes. The unfamiliar distance. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. But things will be different. He nodded. They should be. We sat in silence for a while. I thought I was protecting my family, he said quietly. I didn't realize I was destroying it. You weren't protecting a family, I replied. You were protecting a lie. That night, alone in my bed, I slept without fear for the first time in years. Because the storm had passed. And what it left behind wasn't wreckage. It was truth. What she never expected. The court date came quietly. No dramatic announcements. No headlines. Just a thin envelope in my mailbox with my name typed neatly across the front. By then, I had stopped shaking when I opened letters. Fear had exhausted itself. The investigation confirmed everything. The footage. The hospital report. Witness statements from neighbors who heard shouting that night, who saw me walking into the storm alone. One officer told me something I'll never forget. "You didn't survive by luck," he said. "You survived because you refused to disappear." My daughter-in-law was charged. Not with what she intended, but with what she caused. Neglect. Endangerment. Filing a false report to cover her story. She tried to paint herself as overwhelmed. Emotional. Misunderstood. But lies rot from the inside. And hers had finally collapsed. My son sat beside me in court, stiff and silent. He didn't look at her. Not once. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, the room went still. I stood slowly. "My name is Margaret," I said. "I am 65 years old. I raised a family. I buried my husband. I worked my whole life. I am not fragile. I am not invisible. And I am not disposable." She didn't cry. She stared straight ahead. I didn't look at her again. After that day, everything changed, but not all at once. Healing doesn't arrive like a miracle. It arrives like morning. Quiet. Gradual. Certain. My son asked me to move back. I said no. Not angrily. Not bitterly. Just firmly. "I need my own life now," I told him. He understood. Or at least, he accepted it. Sophie visits every Sunday. We bake. We talk. We laugh the way I used to before I learned to shrink myself. She tells me about school, about dreams she's afraid to say out loud to her parents. I tell her she's allowed to take up space. I fixed the roof. Planted new roses. Painted the living room a color I always loved but was told was too much. Funny how often that phrase is used on women like me. Too much. Too loud. Too emotional. Too old. I am none of those things. I am enough. Sometimes my son calls. Sometimes he doesn't. I don't chase. Love shouldn't require begging. The last message I ever received from her came months later. Just 3 words. "I never thought." She never finished the sentence. But I did. She never thought I would survive. She never thought I would speak. She never thought I would choose myself. And that was her mistake. Because storms don't just destroy. Sometimes, they reveal. And what they revealed in me was something stronger than fear. Something stronger than betrayal. A woman who finally remembered her worth. If you're listening to this and you feel small in your own home, if someone has convinced you that love means silence, if you've been taught to endure instead of live, let me tell you this. It's not too late. And you are not weak for surviving. You are powerful for staying. And unstoppable the moment you stop apologizing for it.